Alphonse Elric to me is one of the more fascinating characters in Fullmetal Alchemist. Granted, there's a lot of characters in the show that are really good and fascinating in their own way, but with Alphonse, it raises like a philosophical question of what it means to be a human and having an identity. Now, Fullmetal Alchemist does have a lot of philosophical ideas throughout it, but to me, with Alphonse, when he loses his body and his soul, he keeps the personal parts of him that make him a human, such as his relationships with his brother and the memories that he had before the incident that made him lose his body. Speaking of memories, something that is addressed early on in the show is if Alphonse's memories are real or not. During the show, Alphonse is confronted by Barry, a being similar to Alphonse not having a body but still existing. Barry brings up a question to Alphonse: are you really Alphonse Elric? And Alphonse believes that he is who he is because of the memories that he has. But then a second question is brought up by Barry: what if your memories are made up? This creates an ongoing story of Alphonse's identity and the difference between the body and the soul. So before we go forward, we should probably try to define what a soul is. Well, according to our wonderful dictionary, a soul is a spiritual or immaterial part of a human being or animal, regarded as immortal. Now, in Fullmetal Alchemist, it is constantly emphasized that the body and the soul are two different entities. If we take the definition of a soul and the body, then the body is the physical structure of a person, and the soul is the spiritual aspect of a person. So when Alphonse loses his entire body to truth, his soul is bound to a suit of armor. That spiritual part of a person still exists in the world. So the person's thoughts, feelings, memories also exist in the real world. And Fullmetal Alchemist separating the two through Alphonse Elric tells us that the body and the soul are separate parts of the person. So after going over the differences between the two, we have an understanding that these two parts are separate and that the soul makes us able to exist in the physical world. But even though Alphonse does exist in the world, he is not able to experience life like most. So now we have to talk about the problems of separating the body and the soul. Being bound to a suit of armor, he cannot eat, he cannot sleep, cannot feel, and can't grow up like a normal child could. These things that most assume are instinctual are completely absent with the lack of a physical body. The things that everyone believes is a natural part of being a person doesn't exist in Al's world. Another part of a person that Alphonse lacks the ability of is expression. Because Alphonse Elric is a suit of armor, he does not have the ability to express any happiness, anger, or sadness. He cannot cry, to express pain or sadness or any other type of emotion. The only way Alphonse can express himself is with his voice and his body language. And even then, he can't really express himself very well with his body language. Sometimes even the animation has to express his body language. So with these kinds of things that are just natural for humans to have are stripped away, and the person is just left with the blank slate and just their previous memories, you have a dilemma about what it means to be human and to have an identity. So earlier, when I was giving a description about the soul, I said that the soul is immortal. So I kind of thought about this, and it was kind of an interesting question. So if the brothers don't get their bodies back, which is the entire plot of the entire show, can Alphonse live forever? But it also kind of poses another question, because Alphonse's body is still stuck in Truth's world. So if Alphonse's body just decays and withers away in Truth's world, will Alphonse's soul die? It's kind of an interesting question, to be honest. Like, you have this dilemma of if Alphonse can be immortal or not. Now, granted, I think in the show, if Alphonse's seal is broken in any way, then the soul withers away and then he's stuck. But I mean, it is kind of an interesting question. Is if the brothers fail to get their mission, can Alphonse be stuck in this suit of armor forever? So after all of this, and with Alphonse lacking half of the characteristics of being a human, that being a physical structure that people have, does that make him less of a human than anybody else? Well, in my opinion, no. Because despite him lacking the physical structure of a human body, he still has the spiritual aspect of a person. Alphonse still believes that he is who he is, that the memories, the relationships, the emotions that he possesses are all real. And these beliefs are what make him Alphonse Elric, the person, not the suit of armor that everyone else sees. He believes who he is, and that really should be all that matters to us as people. That as long as we believe who we are, then that should be enough to be human, right? So I kind of want to throw out a hypothetical situation in a way. So in Alphonse's case, if the soul was taken and then the body was left, would Alphonse be a human? Could Alphonse be a human without the soul but just the body itself? This is kind of a weird question, but honestly, no. Because if a person only has that structure, physical aspect of themselves and not the spiritual aspect, as like if they were just a shell of a person, then they wouldn't really be much of a person in a way. Because if they don't have that personality and that soul aspect, then they're kind of just like a walking husk of a person. They're not really there. Alphonse Elric's story is a story of both tragedy and strength. Despite the pain that Alphonse goes through, he still finds a way to stay strong and stay optimistic. Despite the nightmare that he lives every day, he lives in a world that is a cycle of never-ending pain. A world where he constantly has to reaffirm his existence. Despite knowing that he is real, he still has to reaffirm his identity as a person. It's a very scary reality that someone can live without a physical body, but through their soul. Fullmetal Alchemist shows us that through Alphonse Elric, what it means to be a person and what it means to have an identity. That despite not having that physical structure of a person, he is still a human, and Alphonse learns from the pains of his consequences to become a stronger individual.